I've been thinking about how capitalism is a game a lot recently. Hi, I'm Jeff Grubb. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I've been thinking about that a lot because I think about capitalism a lot, which, for me, it's like, how can you not? It is the system under which we live. So how can you not view everything through the prism of that system? But not everyone does. And, I'll get comments like, hey, you have a robot lawnmower, so how can you criticize capitalism? And it's like, well, homie, just because I'm good at it doesn't mean I can't criticize the game that I'm playing. And capitalism is a game. Like, let's be clear. It is a game. It's not a video game, but it is a game. And that's not some out there idea. This is something that is well understood by, the rich especially treat it as a game where they move things around to maximize their chance to get more points. Points also just being called money or assets or, their wealth evaluation. But they know how to win it, and they know like what it looks like to win and how to rack up a higher score. And that might sound cynical, but it's like, no, that's how academics view it as well. It's not as actually sort of blunt as that. They call it game theory. And that is the school of thinking by which they understand the way that people in a capitalist system, or really any economic system, but again, we live under capitalism for the most part, and really kind of nowhere in the world can escape it. So usually they are looking at the way people behave in capitalism. So you'll have something like the prisoner's dilemma. It's one of the most famous game theory scenarios that there is, but there's also stuff like the stag hunt. And, the thing that's in common with all these is it has one player and then two player. And how do they interact with one another when a certain set of rules is set in front of them, and how like one person's decision affects the other person? Like, what is the best route for each person to take to maximize their return or to maximize their position in that game? This is how academics understand capitalism. But because capitalism is a game, you can analyze it and improve it. And really, capitalism without constant revision is like if you were running a competitive game without balance patches. I've been watching a lot of Gary Stevenson recently. He is a YouTuber, an economist, a former day trader at Citibank. His channel is called Gary's Economics. And he's really put into stark contrast just how important it is to make one major change to the way our system works in order to get everything sort of back on track. There is one way to sort of get this game back in balance, and that is to adequately tax the rich. So to understand this, and I think this is one of the things I'm going to start doing with this YouTube channel, is when I hear someone with good ideas, and if I can make an analogous video to relate these ideas within the terms of video games, I'm going to do it. And with capitalism, it's very easy, or economics in general, because again, these are games. And when, economists come up with game theory scenarios, game designers, video game designers often use those to inform how they should be building games. And so, because of that, I think we can take a game and work backward and better understand what is happening and why certain things should happen. So, let's take the taxing the rich. What's the best thing to really understand this? Now, for me, this is pretty easy. There's an old joke. Mario Kart 8's blue shell is like a tax on the 1%. And, it's a kind of a funny idea, but it's definitely accurate. But I think there's like some layers of truth underneath that. So what is the purpose of the blue shell? Well, I think the first thing you would probably say is it's about fairness. And I think it's interesting, or I think people would say a tax on the rich is about fairness as well. That's only half of it, and maybe not even half of it. Really, the reason the blue shell exists is to keep players engaged. Someone in last place getting a blue shell so they could fire it at the person in first place doesn't really create a fairer game. I mean, if anything, maybe it helps the person at second or third place kind of stay in the race, but it doesn't do much to change the dynamics for the person in last place. So really, does it make the game that much more fair? No. What it does is it enables the person in last place to feel like they have an effect on the outcome of the race, so they remain engaged. It's about keeping the whole system functioning. You want that player in last place to still be engaged, because what happens is, if the person who is losing the most gets disinterested in the events of the race, they'll just leave. They will disassociate from it, and they will feel like, this is not for me. I have no place here, and I don't want to play anymore. And that actually is the worst thing that can happen for a competitive game. Likewise, that would be the worst case scenario for capitalism as well. You need the system to function for everybody in order for people to feel like they want to participate in it. The way our system works now is as if you were to remove the blue shell from Mario Kart. What would happen? Well, the person in first place could continue to pull further and further ahead while everyone else was stuck fighting for the scraps of what was left over. And really, it's way worse than that, because in reality, resources are finite. So those item boxes that people run into in Mario Kart, they don't just automatically replenish. In reality, the person in first place is gobbling up more and more and more of those resources, leaving less and less for people behind them. So the people behind them are fighting with each other for what little is left. And so in Mario Kart, if there were fewer resources, actually, the game would be much less fun for anyone who wasn't in first place, and maybe, second or third place. People who feel like they have a chance can grab a few more of those items and have a chance maybe to get up to first place. A very slim chance. Again, if there's no blue shell to really keep things in check, then they'd have a very slim chance of that, but a chance. Everyone else behind them, though, would begin to they wouldn't want to play anymore. And really, they couldn't play anymore because they don't have access to the resources that everyone else is using to get further ahead. Of course, Mario Kart has other ways of solving this problem. The person in first place gets worse resources from the item boxes than the person in last place. Lightning is like a progressive tax, right? Where the higher you are in the ranking, the longer the lightning affects you. That's a fun one. There's a lot of fairness and catch-up mechanics built into the game. But the point here is all of those are there to serve this one purpose of not fairness, but of keeping people feeling like they have a shot. In reality, it's, again, way worse than that. You don't just need people to feel like they have a shot. You need people to feel like they can survive. They can scrape by. They have a chance of just getting a small piece of the pie so that they can feed themselves, clothe themselves, have children, take care of those children, educate those children, and send them off to a better life than they have. The way it's set up now, the people in first place are pulling way further ahead, taking up all of those resources, and everyone else is left with barely anything. And if you want to understand that, it's very easy. It's averages. And what do I mean by that? The average price of a product, of a service, has gone way up. Let's look at two things: housing and education. Why can no one afford a house, and yet housing prices keep going up? That doesn't make sense, right? Sure, supply is limited, but where's the demand coming from if no one can afford a house? Well, the demand is coming from the rich. They have more than enough money to continue raising the average price of a house, while everyone else is stuck down here earning what they earned previously, which is no longer enough to afford a house, because they are throwing off the average. The game is being made to be unbalanced. Same thing with higher education, where the richest people can afford to take up spots inside of college admissions because they have the most money, and that moves up the cost of college for everybody, even though the average family is not making any really much more than they were 40 years ago. You say, well, that's not how it works. There are mortgages. People can borrow to go to college. Who own those mortgages? Who owns those loans? The rich do. Especially for home mortgages, the rich own home mortgages. And so they really own your home, even if you borrow money from a bank. And that enables the price to continue going up. Gary had a video that I watched today that explained the phases of the wealth squeeze that is happening, where originally they have already looted the wealth, that any wealth that the poor might have had, and now they are looting the wealth of governments and the middle class. And the way they do that is by forcing prices higher and then putting everybody into debt. What I'm getting at here is that the purpose of a tax on the wealthy is not really about fairness. It's not about even what we do with that money. Frankly, at this point, I don't care. I don't care what we take, that revenue created by a wealth tax or a tax on the richest people. And to clarify, this would not be people making $250,000 a year. It would be anyone who is not in the working class. If you work for a living, a wealth tax doesn't make sense because it's a tax on your passive income from your investments from having millions of dollars. Someone who makes $50,000 a week from their money sitting in investments or in savings accounts or anything else. Those are the people we're talking about here. But it's not about fairness. It's not about what we do with that revenue, because it's just about keeping the game engaging. It's about keeping the system functioning and healthy and competitive. If capitalism is a game, and it is, then we should design its functions to work for everybody, to keep it as healthy and competitive as possible. Because what's best for the person in the lead is if everyone is participating. You don't want people to want to fall off. You don't want people at the bottom to have zero resources. Eventually that breaks the whole game. You might be winning now, but it won't last forever. The whole thing will come falling apart unless everyone continues to play. And that's not what's happening right now. So how close are we to implementing any sort of tax, wealth tax? I don't care where the revenue really goes. I don't care what the tax even really looks like. It just needs to, like, some form of blue shell needs to happen on the wealthiest people. And it will be hard to do, but it will absolutely be worth it, because it is the only thing that can actually do something about the cost of living crisis that is destroying everything. Will we get to this point? Well, I hope so. That's why I'm doing videos like this now, I think. We'll see if I continue to do videos like this, but I guess it's why I'm doing this one. I want to take ideas that I think can work, explain them through the prism of video games, and maybe change a couple people's minds or awaken a few people who are like, that sounds right to me. I've always kind of understood this, but now someone's putting it into terms that I understand. Not that you wouldn't understand without me. Of course you would, but I spend all my time thinking about this, so why not have this conversation with y'all? So let's reiterate. The only thing that can make the system function again is taxes on the wealthy. It is not really about fairness. It is about keeping people feeling like they're in the game. If they can do that, then we can close the gap. That brings down the average. And then at the end, you do end up with something that looks like a much fairer system. If you're wondering if this is even possible, we did do this. Coming out of World War II, taxes were enormous on the 1%, 90% or something like that. And look at what everyone could afford back then. Homes, college educations, families with 3 kids, 4 kids. Everyone had a car or 2 cars. They could take a vacation every year. That was the 1950s up through the late 1970s. Then you began pulling back on these taxes, and now here we are ever since Ronald Reagan. So, yeah, it's silly to do this through video games, but it's how I think about things. So let's have these conversations. All right. I think that's going to do it. Thanks for watching. Once again, check out Gary's Economics. I think he's onto something, and y'all should watch it. So we'll kind of figure this out together. Till next time, have a good one. Take care of yourself, and goodbye.